Good morning. This is a self-portrait by an artist named Albrecht Dürer, done in the 1500s. Dürer was a German artist. And this drawing actually really inspired me to start teaching drawing because I learned that he created this self-portrait when he was 13 years old. And it seemed to me when I learned that we are really expecting too little of young people in terms of what they're able to draw. So we are going to do a copy of this, but we're going to really just focus on the head. This drawing also has special meaning to me because on one of my trips to Vienna, I actually was able to do a copy of this drawing in person. They don't usually get the Dürers out because they're fragile, and everybody who goes to the Albertina in Vienna wants to see the Dürers. But it was like my third day of doing copies at the museum, and they knew I wanted to see it, and they got it out just for me and like put me in a special seat where they could watch me. And I got to draw this in person. So we're going to start by conceptualizing the head in three-quarter view, and we're going to learn a few different methods for doing this, but we're going to start today by using what we know about craniums. And notice that this is a partially foreshortened cranium. Remember, from the front it would be a circle. From the side it would be more elongated. This is just like a slightly, it's that racetrack form, but the space in the middle is much smaller because he's turned towards us. And we're going to bring the ear hole back. Let's estimate we can't see his ear, but the ear hole would probably be about here towards the back of the cranium. You see that? That's another thing that happens in three-quarter view is the ear moves towards the back of the head. And we're going to conceptualize the face as coming down as normal from the brow ridge, and we're going to think about the jaw coming around and up as normal towards the ear hole. Now, because this is a perspective box, which is the new thing I was talking about, I'm trying to draw this with my mouse, so it's ugly, I'm sorry. We sort of can also conceptualize a plane change where the front of the face turns to the side. Don't draw that yet because we can also we can refine that line and think about it as coming along the forehead and arcing around the eye socket a little and then dropping down cheek like that. That's a little more of a clear conceptualization. And notice that this line ends up being roughly centered between the back of the head and the edge of the head in this view. So let's draw that now. Remembering that we want the line of the eyes to end up kind of near the middle of the head, like that. So that's our first attempt to conceptualize a three-dimensional head based on an actual cranium form. The other method that I teach sometimes is called the Loomis method, where we conceptualize not the cranium but a sphere. We may or may not do that this semester. I haven't decided. Notice that the head, it feels like his chin is not quite level. Do you see how it feels like his chin is like tipped up just a little? And we can't see the ear, so I'm just guessing, but you see how on my head, when I tip my head up, my ear drops, and when I tip my head down, my ear goes up. I'm guessing that his ear is down a little below the level of his nose, like down here somewhere, so that's making me feel like there's a very slight tilt upward to his head. The next thing we're going to look at is perspective, as I warned you, and we're going to think about orthogonals. So the way perspective comes into portraiture is mainly in the fact that these two lines that I just drew are converging. And that's because the distance between like the pupil and the corner of the mouth on this side is bigger than the distance between the pupil and the corner of the mouth on the other side. So this becomes a perspective problem where we want to look at these angles and we want to make sure that we draw them a little bit differently. So let's start with the eye angle, and let's make sure it's sloping up at about 5 degrees from horizontal, like that. And then we're going to just mark the bottom of the nose. Notice the bottom of the nose stays inside this outside contour of the cheek. And then we're just going to mark the line between the lips about a third of the way down between here and here. And we're going to draw this angle, and we're going to draw it a little higher, like maybe, I'm guessing closer to 10 degrees. Can everyone see that difference? It's really subtle, but the main thing that people get wrong when they start out in 3/4 view is they really want these lines to be parallel, and they really cannot be parallel, in the same way that the receding edges of a box cannot be parallel. Okay. If I take only one measurement on a 3/4 view portrait, it's going to be the bridge of the nose. And so let's clean this up, and we're just going to focus on locating this turn right here. And we're going to use fractional thinking. If we imagine where the back of the skull probably is, he does have pretty full hair. So we're going to put the back of the skull about here, and the side of the face here, and we're going to estimate how far over this is compared to this. And I'm going to say about 1/7. You can estimate it for yourself, but it's a small amount, right? Can everybody see that? It's like a 1/6, a 1/7, something like that. I think it's a little more than an 1/8. And that's really important because the main other mistake that people make when they draw 3/4 view heads is they really want this, which is the bridge of the nose, to be where it is in a front view, which is exactly in the middle. But you'll notice that when I turn my head one way or the other way, that bridge of the nose moves as I move. So very important to place that correctly. Now I'm going to very lightly sketch the line of the nose, sort of blocking that in. and we're going to talk about what we're seeing on the actual eyes. Now, Dürer is only 13. This is not a perfect drawing. That's partly why we're copying it. It's a little less intimidating than it might be than a more mature work from Durer would be. But he's still getting a lot of things right. One of the main things that I want you to notice is that this eye is occupying more space in the drawing than this eye. In fact, it's occupying about 50% more space. And the reason for that is because I'm going to demonstrate this for you. We've got two eyes, and from the front, they're the same size, right? From the side, we only see one of them, so we don't even have a basis for comparison. Most people make the mistake of believing the face is somewhat flat, and so when the face turns, if the face was flat, these two eyes would both foreshorten about the same amount. Do you see what's happening there? The one on the right is a little smaller because it's farther, but the amount of foreshortening is the same on both. But in fact, faces aren't flat. They curve like that. And so what we're seeing from the front is that actually both eyes are slightly foreshortened because both eyes are curving away from us. When the head turns a little bit to one side, what happens is that the eye that's nearer to us is a little less foreshortened because it's facing us more than it was before. You see that? But the eye on the other side is more foreshortened. Even more, I should say, because it was foreshortened to begin with. So we go from perfect symmetry here to a pretty strong asymmetry here. Can you see that? And again, the big idea here is that it's because faces are horseshoe-shaped from above, and you can think about like if you have ever had a retainer, it was a U shape. You know, if you think about your glasses curve back. So faces are not flat, they are bent, and that's why we get that effect. We would not get it if faces were flat. So years of teaching this has led me to understand that the most common error that anyone makes is just they really want the eyes to stay the same size. So we're going to now try to draw this. We'll start with the distant eye. And here's where Dürer frankly screwed up a little because he really wanted this eye to come to a point, which in this view it probably shouldn't. But we're just going to draw what he did for today. And we'll talk more about the way it should look later. So we're going to have to pack this eye into this tiny space, and we're going to draw the form of the eyelid above it. And this is the line. Remember, we do this very lightly because that's the margin of the white of the eye at the bottom. And this is the lash line down below that. So this is a pair of lines. The bottom one is a little darker than the top one. That's as close as I can get. And now the iris. Remember, one way to think about anytime you have to draw an iris, look at this shape here. It's like this little kind of shark tooth shape. If you just focus on drawing that shape correctly instead of focusing on the iris will just take care of itself. You see that? And the pupil. And notice that there's virtually no space between the bridge of the nose and where this eye begins. You see that? It's like really packed in there. And we're going to do a little shading above the eyelid. And we're going to refine this curve. There's a little bulge outwards above the eyelid and a very slight curve outward under the lid where the cheek starts to curve out. And a little shading behind the bridge of the nose here. I'll come look at your drawings in a minute. Let's just get that other eye drawn. There's one other really key point that I want to demonstrate for you, and that is I have to put a piece of tape on my face to do this, so let's see if I can show you on here. So there's a space here on the side of the nose just past the bridge, and you'll notice that when I'm facing you, that space is very foreshortened, right? When I turn this way, it becomes more foreshortened. It virtually disappears. And when I turn this way, it is less foreshortened. You see how much wider it gets? I really want you to look and understand this, because this is the biggest error people make, is they really want the bridge of the nose to be centered between the eyes, but it can't be in a 3/4 view, because when I'm looking this way, this space is huge on this side, it's tiny on the other. When I turn the other way, the opposite thing happens. Do you see what I'm saying? So in our drawings, how can I make myself smaller again? What we are seeing is virtually no space here. Here's the margin of the bridge of the nose. It goes from between here and here. You see that? That's like sort of like here to here. And then here's that giant space on this side that opens up because of the turn of the head. And another way we can think about it is, if we think in terms of intervals, we've got one interval here, and then about another half an interval before we get to that eye. So there's our eye, one interval, two intervals, another half an interval. So the inside corner of this eye is way out here. So this eye, and you see how that corresponds to the original thinking we did on the location of the cheekbone and the eye socket over here. So this eye, and remember, we need to keep things on this line that we started out with. This eye is way out here. Here's the lid. He's not really, notice he looks a little kind of wired or something, because he's showing a little he doesn't have the upper lid covering the top of the iris the way it would in a more relaxed pose. He's probably working pretty hard to get this drawing right at age 13, so remember, he's like in 8th grade doing this, so and we can see very clearly with this shaded form, like the basic contour of the eye socket. And there's always some shading inside the corner of the eye. That's usually one of the darkest shadow areas on the face. And we end up with something like this. So I hope this is making sense so far. I'm going to come have a quick check. So we're going to take a look at the nostrils. Notice that when we come around the bottom of the nose, this nostril is basically foreshortened, almost completely out of existence. Here's the tip of the nose, which is kind of a soft plane change, and then this nostril. And if I drop a plumb line down, that might help me locate that nostril, because I know where this is. I can see that if I come straight down from here, I should be hitting the back of this nostril. So I was putting that a little too far back. One thing that makes him look like he's so young is he's got a fairly petite nose. And the back of the ala, I could reference to sort of this side of the bridge of the nose. That's going to be about here. And when you're drawing from life, you can drop plumb lines. We have some strings with weights on the end. That's a way that artists typically use plumb lines in real life. When I'm using this software program, I can just draw them on. But that's an important concept. So a little shading under the tip of the nose. And yeah, I keep making his nostril a little too big. I'm going to try again on that. That feels a little better to me. Even in the Middle Ages, you've probably seen paintings where the artists, they make everyone look adult, because we fall into habits drawing adults, and then when we draw kids, we just don't break out of those habits and typically make people look older than they are. Hopefully I'm not going to do that today, but we'll see. The philtrum, think about the root of the philtrum. So we got the tip of the nose coming back here, and now we've got this form coming down from that root. And then under the philtrum, we've got that, we kind of know roughly where the mouth should be. We've got this central portion of the Cupid's bow. And here's another foreshortening example. We've got the same kind of thing going on. We've got the mouth, which is the Cupid's bow from the front, completely symmetrical. And so we tend to think it's flat, right? Looks pretty flat, but again, think about the shape of a retainer and think it's a U shape, right? So it's, if it was flat, it would foreshorten the same on both sides. But because it's a U shape, it's curved like this. And so it foreshortens a lot on the right, and it unforeshortens on the left. And that's what we're seeing here. Can you see that? The side on the right is tiny. The side on the left is very long. So that's what we're going to draw. But you need to recognize that your instinct is going to be to take this asymmetry and make the two sides even, because you're used to drawing people from the front and you're used to thinking of the face as flat. So we're going to do extremely asymmetrical like that, and notice that there's a little overlap between the center curve of the mouth and the last section, which is receding from us. We don't want to do a hard outline on the lip, but we can do a very faint shading of the upper lip like that. And a lot of people have a sort of a crease running down the center of their lower lip, and you can see that faintly here. That's a useful point of reference. We can just sort of draw that crease and get that kind of roundness to the lower lip. And then this lower lip is very foreshortened on this side again, and more elongated on this side. There's a faint little pocket of not really a shadow but a halftone at the outside corner of the mouth, which is very important for expression. And here's the shadow under the lower lip, which we always draw in typical light sources. And that's what kind of brings out the form of the lower lip. And notice that this bottom lip is sort of turning into shadow on the right edge, but it's fully in light on the left. I usually don't do halftones until the very end, but in this drawing, I think it's going to be useful to just throw a little halftone in here to sort of define where the bridge of the nose is happening. And halftones can be very useful for showing plane changes. And there's a little halftone along the center of the nose also, and even up into the bridge of the nose. Okay. Now we're gonna, I always like to define the line of the cheek last. What I like to do before that is define the chin. We've already defined the eye socket and the chin, and then we're going to think of this as a kind of connector between them. So let's see if I can draw a circle here. So the chin is sort of here, and the bottom lip is sort of centered around like here. And the important thing to recognize is how far to the left the mass of the chin is compared to the bottom lip. You see that? It's like we're going to take this elliptical form and squeeze it. It barely comes past the center point of the lip on this side, and it comes way past the corner of the mouth on this side. So that relationship is what signifies to the viewer that the chin is set back behind the lower lip. And that's where three-quarter views are really the most descriptive views of a human head. That's another reason that we like them, because we're we're getting information about the front view and the side view all in one drawing. From the pure front view, you wouldn't really know how far the chin projects. From a pure side view, you wouldn't know how far apart the eyes are, but in a 3/4 view, we're seeing everything. And having established the chin, now we're going to curve up. There's usually just a little bit of a pouch kind of around the mouth. There's a set of muscles that encircle the mouth that create a slight bulge. And that's going to be visible right here as just a slight bulge outward. And then we're going to curve up under the cheekbone. Like that. And then we're going to curve back. We already sort of defined the jaw, so don't use a heavy line right here. Just sort of gently curve back along the angle of the jaw. It's always a good idea to relate the position of the jaw to the position of the mouth. So if we look at where this point is and we go straight across, you see how the jaw is turning sort of near the top of the chin. Like, so it's turning about here. And it's really always important to think about where your jaw is turning and get that located properly. So we've done all the hard part. We're going to block in some of the hair now. Okay, so what we always do is we block in the big shapes of the hair and the hat. So he's got this kind of bowl haircut. Again, you guys, he's 13 years old. Just think about it. His father was an artist who made engravings on metalwork, particularly armor. And that's why he probably trained in that field, and that's why his hatching is so beautiful, because engravers have to create tone with hatched lines. And that's why Durer went on to become such an amazing printmaker, among other things. A lot of his prints are wood engravings. So I'm going to start with that line of the hat. There's his bangs. And always work from the simple to the complex. So if we just look at this, you see how this is like basically a rectangle. See that shape? And that shape is about 2/3 as wide as this distance. So again, we're working from what we don't know to what we know. So we know this distance, and then we're going about 2/3 as wide here. And then we're just going to block in this rectangle. It comes down past the bottom of his neck. And you see how much smarter this is than just starting to draw one hair at a time. You draw one hair at a time, you're going to immediately get lost. If you approach it like this and just look for the big forms, very simple. And I like to teach this way because you can see, I can show you with those annotated red lines exactly what I would be looking for if I was drawing this from just immediate observation. Time to zoom out a little so you can see what I'm doing here. And here we're going to start by thinking of this angle, which is about 45 degrees. And it turns into this angle, which is about steeper. I would say that's about 70 degrees from horizontal. And then this angle, which is going off a little bit past 90. And then we're going to start by thinking of this as horizontal and this as a continuation of the hairline. So that's our big kind of block in. And before I do the contours, I'm just going to make this a little easier for me to understand by throwing a first shading on the part of the hair that's in shadow and sharpening this edge a little. And shading down this cheek a little, because by making my brain see these forms as volumes instead of lines, I'm going to make better choices about exactly what this drawing needs to become finished. And we're trying to finish it in the next 10 minutes or so. So we're going to work a little quicker. And this edge, notice, gets sharpened by the hair being darker than the cheek. So I'm going to go ahead and really bring that out. And you see how that makes the drawing so much easier to read. The more legible the drawing is, the better the work is that you can do on it. And we're not going to go too hard on all this hair. Let's just clean this up. And the most important thing to see about the hair is where it turns away from the light. So we do have a shadow edge. Everything on this side is darker. Everything on the other side is lighter. Same goes for on the hat. We've got this contour that's pretty easy to draw now that I've blocked everything in. And the hat gets darker from here over. There's no accident that this shadow edge kind of lines up with this shadow edge. That's where the light ends. Notice there's really heavy line weight right here, and then just do the best you can with this. We're going to quickly turn these blocky lines into beautiful contours. And halftone along the top edge of the hat. A little detail along this fringe of bangs. A little darkening along the bottom edge of the hat. And you don't have to keep up with me. I'm just going to do a really cursory kind of completion of this drawing so I can come around and take a look at what you did. We could spend an hour just studying this hair. It's very beautifully drawn. Notice that sense of the hair falling into distinct clumps, and notice that each clump has its own sort of region of shadow and region of highlight. Very, very nicely drawn, but we don't really have time to dive into that today. Okay, that's gonna do it for this video demonstration. We still have a few minutes of class left, and so I'm gonna end this video a little early, and thanks to my subscribers for watching, and I'll see you next time.